Welcome to A Fine Time, The Nanny Revisited. This is a podcast about The Nanny, where we recap each episode and then discuss, sharing our own unique take on each episode. I'm Bernadette.
And I'm Debbie. Today, we're talking about episode 35, The Strike. As usual, we'll start with a brief summary of the episode. Maxwell and Cece's latest production, Norma, is opening on Broadway, and the whole household is slated to attend opening night. After Fran tells Brighton he cannot go to the mall in New Jersey, Brighton gets Maxwell's permission to go to the mall. Fran confronts Maxwell about him undermining her authority, explaining that they need to present a united front because children are like a brassiere. They divide and separate. If Fran's promise not to rely on any more bra analogies wasn't enough, Maxwell is convinced that Brighton was trying to pull a fast one when they learn about the decoy driver hired from the Gap. Maxwell's first instinct is to punish Brighton by not letting him attend opening night, but Fran realizes that that would be a reward for bad behavior. So Brighton gets to join the rest of the family in the household, the rest of the family and the household for all three acts. After the debut performance, the family arrives for a celebratory dinner with the cast, the crew, and other important people, but Fran is unable to join the party because doing so would force her to cross a picket line. The busboys there are on strike. Instead of a triumphant photo from a good opening night, the papers contain a picture of Maxwell dragging Fran across the picket line. Sally Jesse Raphael invites them on her show, and while Cece tries to paint Fran as a disgruntled nut, Fran learns that the reason Maxwell did what he did was that he wanted her at the party because she's important to him. Bernadette, do you want to add anything?
No, you did a great job.
Thank you. Would you like to take us to the kitchen?
Yes, so we opened the episode in the kitchen, and it actually, Fran's walking in. Again, this is a scene where we need to discuss what she's wearing.
Agreed.
She is wearing a floor length multicolored, like striped, shiny dress that's very form fitting.
Yes.
To
Horizontal stripes.
Yes, horizontal stripes, um, you know, of all shades, all different colors. Niles responds when she walks in with "God Save the Queen." She asks him, "Do I look like a roll of lifesavers?" Which is
Yep.
actually a pretty apt kind of, color wise. And he's like, "Yes, but the flavor," and I didn't catch this part. Do you have the line he said,
Yes.
Debbie?
Yes, but the flavors go on and on.
Yes. And Niles, it's always the quiet ones.
Exactly.
So she is trying on this dress because she's trying to find a dress to wear to the opening of Maxwell's new show Norma. But she needs to practice sitting in this. So she attempts to sit in the kitchen chair, but she kind of ends up flopped to her side, almost like a mermaid.
Yeah. Yeah.
And and of course, Niles dryly comments that looks natural. And she's like, maybe I'll sit in the aisle. um, but so then Niles has to help her up back to her feet.
Right.
Uh,
And I think it's worth noting that she couldn't bend her legs. She couldn't,
mhm.
like, her
Yeah,
feet were not
that's how
touching the
form
ground.
fitting. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
Continue.
So Maxwell and Cece then come in as well, and they have taken out a full ad in the paper for Norma, and it's a show based off of Norma Ray and it's union work, all that. And, they're so proud of this ad. But then as they're reading it, it says CC Boobcock.
Correct.
And Cece's like, how can this happen? I proofed it and then I gave it to Niles to send, and then it clicks.
Yeah.
And I was like, oh, how embarrassing. Someone at the ad agency must have it out for you.
Exactly.
But everybody knows what really happened there.
Yeah.
So apparently the family has already been to like the preview of the show. Um, and Fran like that sweatshop number. uh, but the Niles, you can tell, was not really super pleased with it. It was 3 hours and 15 minutes, but oh, it felt like 3 hours and 10 minutes, you know,
Right.
Niles. Oh, and what a genius move to put no intermission. And then, of course, he kind of mimes putting a noose around his neck. But Maxwell's oblivious to this. Um,
Yeah.
but anyway, Fran's talking about how her whole family supports unions. She had an Aunt Tessie who was all blouse, and the others kind of look at her like, what? And she's like, "Oh, remember when you look for a union label or look for a union label when looking for roofing or blouse? Is that what you caught?"
Yeah, she spoke too fast. I
Yeah,
didn't get it.
okay. Something along those lines. It's like a little jingle or something. Um, and Niles, Fran is excited about the opening show, and Niles kind of does the kissy face to her as if she's kissing up to
Mm-hmm.
Maxwell. And, Fran's like, I'm not kissing up. But, aren't you interested in going to the after party where there's a bunch of celebrities, where you can hobnob with them? And Niall says, "Well, no one I've been to a ton and no one has hopped my knob, any knob." And then Fran's advice to him, because at this point Maxwell's out of the kitchen. She says, "Try wearing something more low cut." So yeah, essentially this opening scene establishes that there is this new uh, Broadway show that Maxwell's gonna, the premiere's coming up, and it's about unions. Is there anything you want to add to this opening scene, Debbie?
Nope, you did a great job.
Thank you. Do you want to take us to the living room?
I'd love to. So there's still, I don't know if excitement is overstating it, but there's a bit of excitement in the air because they're trying to get ready for opening night, and Maggie's doing what Fran just did previously and trying to figure out what she's going to wear. And so she's asking Fran, "What about this?" And she's, again, this is a place where we need to talk about what she's wearing. She's wearing a blue, uh, a low cut blue sparkly sequin dress that basically covers her butt and doesn't go any farther. It's
Mm-hmm.
very short. And Fran looks up and says, "Oh, honey, it's entirely too revealing. No, 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 no. It makes you look cheap and tawdry. Go put it back in my closet,"
Mm-hmm.
because it was Fran's. Um,
Yes.
so then, Gracie comes in and she's complaining that Brighton says he can see up her dress when she wears her Mary Jane's. And Fran basically tells her, "Don't listen to him. They make you look very leggy." And she then looks at Gracie's shoes and says, "Oh, I see you're wearing the new Barbie underpants I got you." And Gracie's
Mm-hmm.
clearly mortified and runs out of the room screaming. Then
Mm-hmm.
Brighton comes in and asks if he can go to the mall, the new mall in Jersey, with Kyle and a couple of guys. And Fran wants to know the details, like she's being a responsible childcare provider. Who's driving? Oh, Kyle's brother. How long has he had his license? A while. A while, 10 years, or a while like he still looks like the picture on his license? Um, and Fran basically comes to the conclusion that she doesn't want him getting in a car with a couple of guys who drive fast and act fresh. The next thing you know, you're hitchhiking on the side of the Jersey Turnpike wearing far too much makeup for your age. "Oh, I'm having a hypoglycemic attack. I better have some
Mm-hmm.
Godiva." So she goes and gets herself a piece of chocolate. And she explains that, that no, basically you're not going. That mall's not that great. They don't have a Judy's there. Plus, tonight's your father's big opening night. What if you got stuck in traffic and missed the whole thing? And Brighton's like, "Oh, I'm not that lucky."
Mm-hmm.
Um, so anyway, Fran has told him no. I don't know where you want to cut this scene. Um,
Um, yeah, I can quickly do the hallway and wrap up if that's okay.
sure, if you want.
Okay. So again, it's one of those scenes where it kind of cuts to Brighton going out to the hallway where his father is, and he asks him if he can go to the mall with Kyle, and he actually does say, um, I already talked to Fran because he's like, what did Fran say? I already talked to her, and she's leaning towards no, but I think she's just being overprotective, you know. A man needs to get away. He's trying to pull that angle with his dad,
Yep.
and it works. Because Cece kind of indicates from the hall, like, she beckons Maxwell in, and Maxwell's like, yeah, sometimes they do need to get away. All right, off you go. And
Correct.
then Brighton kind of goes back through the door. Again, this mysterious door that always goes to different places. And it's back in the living room, and he's kind of going, yes, to himself, but Fran comes out, catching him.
Fran was behind the door.
yeah, and waiting. And he goes, because he said yes, sees Fran and goes, yesterday, all my troubles seem so far away. And then she, of course, finishes off by saying, and now it looks like their troubles are here to stay. And she says, usually she's pretty forgiving, but it's the 28th day of the month. So she grabs
Correct.
right. So
Didn't
yeah,
care for that explanation as to why she was going to torture him, but
no.
he sort of
But
deserved it.
yeah, so he got caught immediately.
Exactly.
Um, okay, so you want to take us to the next scene, unless you had
Sure.
something next.
I believe we're in the office next.
Yes, but wait, just quickly before we move on, whenever Brighton asks to go with Kyle, Fran asks him which Kyle.
Oh,
I forgot
yes.
the first descriptor, but the second one, or the one who smells like cheese.
The first one was the
And
guy with braces.
okay, and the other one's the guy who smells like cheese, and then Brighton says cheese, and she's like, "Oh, thank goodness, the other one's weird." But that
Right.
cheese reference comes up later, so.
Yes. No, thank you for adding that. Yeah. Um, so we then go into the office and we see that Niles is feverishly polishing the couch. And Maxwell asks him, how long are you going to polish that couch? The fumes are rather overwhelming. And Niles looks up and he has this like look on his face. After a while, you don't notice them, sir. Like he's clearly been sniffing the fumes.
Yes.
Um,
Mhm.
and he explains that he couldn't resist the infomercial. Unwanted dirt just slides right off. And this is again one of those moments where the comedic timing of the show is just fantastic. As soon as he says unwanted dirt just slides right off, Cece leans against the couch and then slips right off and falls.
Mhm.
To which Niall says, voila.
Yeah.
And so Fran walks in and it's Cece's trying to like gather her papers and gather herself back up. And Fran comments, must be 5 o'clock somewhere. And
Mhm.
Cece's like, I haven't been drinking. I just slid off the couch. And Fran's like, and Ted Kennedy's nose is just sun damaged.
Mhm.
Um, so Maxwell's in a good mood. Fran says she wants to talk to him for a second. And he looks at her and she starts talking about Brighton. And he said, oh, time's up. Like he let her talk for 1 second. And
Mhm.
Fran's like, well, you're in a good mood. I'll take care of that. Cece then takes that as her cue to leave, saying she needs to pick up her dress from the dry cleaners. And we hear she's walked out of the office and we hear, whoa! And like the paper she was holding fly back into the room. We hear a thud.
Mhm.
And Niles adds, it's also an excellent floor polish.
Mhm.
And he walks out. So Maxwell then turns his attention to Fran and says, what about basically what's the deal with Brighton? And Fran says, we have a small problem. Brighton knew I didn't want him to go to the mall. He used you to undermine me. And Maxwell says, no, in all fairness, he made it perfectly clear that you'd already said no. And so Fran's like, okay, well, then we don't have a small problem. We have a big problem.
Mhm.
And Maxwell parrots the overprotective line that Brighton used on him. And Fran says, how did you think he was going to get to Jersey? He's going to Jersey, is the reaction. And
Mhm.
I mean, it's notable that when Brighton asked Fran, he said he wanted to go to the mall the new mall in Jersey. When he asked his father, he just says the mall.
Yeah.
Um, and so Fran explains to Maxwell, when the kids say Fran said no, that's the big robot saying danger, Will Robinson.
Mhm.
Um, and Maxwell kind of to himself says, I could have stayed in England. And so Fran
Mhm.
says, look, I'll make it easy for you. Children are like a brassiere. And Maxwell is clearly very torn. He's like,
Yes.
one part of me says, get out the window quick. But the other part just has to know why. And so
Yes.
Fran uses the explanation because they divide and separate. Your mother never told you that? And he's like, no, we always thought Mummy should have talked more about her underwear. And
Mhm.
so Fran explains, my point is, you have to give me full support. You must back me up no matter what. And so Maxwell resignedly agrees. He promises to back her up if she promises no more brassiere analogies, to which she says, cross my heart,
Mhm. Yep.
which clearly is another brassiere analogy.
Yeah. Yeah. The only thing I kind of wanted to add is I thought it was interesting that Niles actually helped Cece up when she slid off the couch. Did you notice that?
He's clearly high. Sorry.
Yeah. I was just like,
Clearly.
that seems, uncharacteristic of him. But yeah. Um, so anyway, we are the next scene is in the living room, and we only see Fran in the first shot, and she's basically chiding someone, saying like, "Come on, you got to get ready, put on a face." Uh, the show starts in 4 hours, and of course, when the camera pans, it's Niles sitting at the bottom step of the
Right.
staircase, kind of pouting, and clearly not wanting to go. And Maxwell comes in right when she's, talking, to him and inquires. And Niles, of course, covers it by saying, "Oh, it's just the anticipation, 4 hours until Norma."
Right. And he gets
Uh,
this big grin on his face.
yes,
Big
yeah,
dead-eyed grin.
yes.
Continue.
And then, um, but then there's, you know, Brighton. Well, I think first, does Brighton come in first, or do they smell cheese first, Debbie?
Well, Brighton has to be there because Niles says, "Do you smell
Yeah.
cheese?" And Brighton says, "Oh, that's
Oh, that's
Kyle."
Kyle. And then sure enough, um, you know, Niles goes towards the door to answer it, but in the meantime, Maxwell's like to Brighton, "Oh, I've changed my mind." And at the door you see Niles opening it. "Oh, yes, Master Kyle, come
Right.
in." And then of course, uh he comes in, and he's a very kind of sullen looking. How would you describe Kyle? Um
Um, he's
uh,
kind of
he's
he's
like,
thin. He has glasses. He's wearing an oversized coat.
yeah, like he's purposefully being like very like awkward, or like I think they're trying to again kind of play off of that earlier joke that Fran was happy that Brighton was going with Kyle who smells like cheese instead of Kyle who has braces, because the one with braces is weird, but
Right.
they're trying to make it seem like this kid is weird as well, if that makes any sense.
Yeah. I mean, it makes you wonder what the kid with braces is like.
Exactly. Yeah, exactly. Because Kyle doesn't say a word in this scene. Um, Maxwell, of course, does kind of, as Kyle gets closer, he asks, "Is someone making grilled cheese?"
Yup.
So again, Fran responds, "Oh, Kyle's just overheated. Kyle, you can take off your jacket."
Yeah.
Well, Maxwell again's trying to explain he's changed his mind, but in comes in
Peter
this
Bidwell.
clean, yep, this clean cut uh, guy. Um, and he's, very charming, like, "Oh, Mr., um,
Mr. Sheffield, I saw your
Sheffield, I
last
saw your
play.
last play. It was brilliant." Like obviously making a really good impression. And you can see Maxwell wavering a bit, and Fran takes him aside. And
Mm-hmm.
she's like, "Dollar for dollar, he's a decoy." And she
Dollar for
explains,
donuts,
oh, donuts. Okay.
which I thought I've never heard that expression elsewhere. And I was like, that is a great expression.
Okay. Because I thought
Continue.
dollar for dollar. But yeah, but anyway, she's like, "He's a decoy." And Maxwell's like, "What? He seems like a person perfectly nice." And she explains that when she was younger, like she and her friends had a similar type of thing, where they would send like the clean cut looking girl to the parents, but then really it was someone else. What she said, like carving the initials of her boyfriend's name and
Burning.
burning, you know. And so she, she's like, "Here, look." So she starts questioning the guy, um, Peter. She
Right.
asks, "Oh, do you go to school around here?" "Oh, I go around the corner." "Oh, is it with," and she says something, and then Schlemmer, and
Right. So
he,
she asks, "Oh, Hamaka or Schlema?" And
uh-huh,
it's
he,
important because he doesn't catch the pronunciation.
mm,
He says,
mhm,
Schlemmer, like
yeah,
hard
like
er.
yeah, very much like he's obviously lying, uncomfortable, trying to figure out how to answer. And so, of course, then Fran's like, you know, where did they get you? Oh, the Gap. How much
Yep.
are they paying you? $20.
Yep.
And then busted, you guys, to Brighton and Kyle. And uh, Peter's obviously reading the situation, makes for the door and says, "Sorry, guys, no refunds."
Right.
And Brighton tries to cover for this by going, "Kyle, you paid him? Well, if he's not driving, I'm not going." And then like closes the door on Kyle because he's
Right.
at this point outside, like on
He
the
like
other side.
pushes him out.
Yeah. And Kyle, you can see, is still kind of standing there looking through like the door pane.
It's even sadder than that because it's not just he's like looking through, he's like holding the like wrought iron like design on the door. Like
And
he's
he has
just like
not,
confused and sad and yeah.
yeah, he has not said a single word this entire scene.
No.
And so, anyway, but obviously that did not do the trick in getting Brighton off the hook. He is grounded, uh, but according to Mr. Sheffield. But then Mr. Sheffield takes it a step further and says, "And you're not going to the show tonight." Oh, but I've only seen it once.
Right.
And Maxwell, again, totally oblivious, is like, "Well, you should have thought of that before." And then Brighton makes to leave, and Fran's like, "Freeze." And she turns to Maxwell, "Oh, Mr. Sheffield, you're being too severe. He's a good boy." And Brighton's like, "No, I'm not. I'm bad. Very bad." And but Fran again is like, "No, like he should come with us and see all three acts." And then Brighton's like, "I don't deserve it." And Fran's like, "Oh, baby, you do.
You really do.
You really do." So
Exactly.
Brighton was not able to get out of going to the show.
Correct.
Is there
Uh
anything else you want to add to that scene?
no, you did a great job on that.
Thanks.
Um so we as the audience do not get to see Maxwell's play of Norma.
Hmm.
Instead, where we jump to after the show, after the performance, they arrive at the Whitney Hotel, and you know, at first we see the like limo, and we hear Fran's voice over it. Another opening, another shrimp. I mean, show. Um, and so like they're getting out of the limo, and Maxwell helps her out, and she did not wear the Fruit Loop, the lifesaver dress.
Hmm.
She wore a different rainbow dress, which we'll talk about later. Maxwell was like, what were the women behind you saying? And she's like, oh, they were complaining about something like not being able to see, and she's like touching her big hair.
Hmm.
Um, and the family is like walking in, and Cece tells Fran, free shrimp, Nanny fine, like that way. And Fran's like, you don't need to tell me twice. And photographer comes, he wants to take a picture of Maxwell and Miss Boobcock. And at
Hmm.
first Cece looks a little annoyed, but then she smiles. And Fran's just sort of like transfixed. She's looking at what's going on. Like Maxwell and Cece, everyone else has already like walked, like they're either in or like almost into the hotel. And Fran's like, oh no, are the busboys on strike? And Cece's like, oh my God, those poor people. Who's going to clear their tables?
Hmm.
Um, and Maxwell like beckons to her to come. And she's unable to move. She says, my mother had 3 rules: never make contact with the public toilet, never, ever, ever cross a picket line. And what was the third one? Oh yeah, never wear musk oil to the zoo. And she's explaining like her family, like her aunt would roll over in her grave, which was paid for by her union. Like she cannot cross the picket line. And Max was like, stop making a scene, like let's go. And what does he do? He starts dragging her across the picket line, and she's like grabbing at one of the bus boys to like not go across the picket line. And they're photographed in that, shall we say, compromised position.
Hmm.
Um, and we see what the newspaper looks like. Sheffield, and the headline is Sheffield has labor pains
Yep.
over the picture of him dragging her.
Yeah.
Do you
Yeah.
want to add
Because like
anything?
just
Oh,
that I don't know if he said this. He said that he was embarrassing her when she refused to go with him. But then he starts like trying to forcibly. drag her. And I think that made the situation worse.
Yeah.
But yeah. So we then go to the kitchen the next morning.
Yep.
Fran comes in her bathrobe, and someone's at the refrigerator. You only see like the feet. Well, you don't see the face, right?
The fridge is open.
Yes.
That's why.
Yes, and Fran assumes it's Niles, and so she walks over to the counter. Her back's to the refrigerator, so not looking directly there, and she starts talking like, "Oh, Niles, I really ruined, Mr. Sheffield's night last night. Um, you know, uh, when I see him, I'm gonna try to be adorable or tell him he's adorable." And of course, as she starts talking, the door closes and we see it's Maxwell standing there. And of
Yep.
course, he's listening with interest over, her shoulder. I'll tell him he's adorable. I'll compliment his accent. And if that doesn't work, I'll turn on the tears. He really is a sucker for them. And then, of course, Niles walks in just then. She's like, "Oh, hi, Naz." And then she immediately realizes,
Yep.
oops. And before even turning, she's like to Niles, "Can you drop me off at unemployment?"
Right.
And of course, she gets stopped in her tracks. And uh, Maxwell asks for the newspaper, the entertainment section from Niles. And Fran's like, "Oh, I've already skimmed through it." And uh, Maxwell opens it, and there's a big, like, square cut out
Right. She
from the
said that she scoured the paper and there was
and
no
there was
mention
nothing in there.
of
Yeah.
our little incident. And then he
Yes.
opens the paper.
And it's clearly, that what we previously saw, that, Sheffield has labor pains article. And she's just like, "It was a coupon?" Which clearly
Exactly.
it's not a coupon. And then he's like, "Oh, well, I wonder what it would have looked like." And he puts his face through it and he yells, "Miss Fine."
Exactly.
And again, Fran's trying to explain fines don't cross lines, you know.
I have
And
this verbatim if you want it.
okay, if you want to go for it.
The fines don't cross picket lines. It's against our religion. Like eating pork. You eat bacon. No, I don't. You most certainly do. All right, but only if it's extra crispy or in a club sandwich. And don't ever tell my grandmother. She eats it too. Oh, all right, we all do.
Yeah.
We'll talk about that later. Continue.
Mhm. Yeah. But again, she's trying to explain to him that I guess he doesn't understand. I understand a lot. But she's like, "Well, I guess you blue bloods don't understand us blue collars." And he's trying to explain, well, he's a working stiff as well. And of course, with the kind of comedy that's in the show, he immediately notices something on his shoe. And Niles is down, I think, cleaning the oven or something. He's already kneeling on the floor. So Maxwell just puts his shoe like on Niles's knee to clean.
Yep.
And in comes Maggie asking if she can take the limo for her horse riding lesson. And then Gracie's like, "Well, but I need it because I have a play date with Ivanka Trump." And then Maxwell's like, "Well, I guess one of you is going to has to take the town car." And they leave. And he turns to them like, "See, we have problems too."
Right.
And which is clearly not the same kind of problems, right?
No.
And but Cece walks in and she has some news.
She's very excited.
She is. And Niles is like, "Oh, is there a message on your answering machine?" And at first she doesn't respond to that, but then she after a second does, like, "No." But apparently Sally Jesse Raphael wants them on her show. There's around the theater, there's a long line already around the block. Sally Jesse Raphael wants them on the show. And then something I was not too pleased on was, and I'm sure you saw this coming, Debbie.
I did.
Oh, Sally Jesse Raphael, I love her. Oprah, she kind of fluctuates, but Sally, she maintains her ideal weight.
Yep. I knew you were going to bring that up.
Yeah, not great. Um,
So
But
Maxwell
basically,
is not thrilled
yeah,
about the invitation.
Maxwell's like, No, this is just going to make things work." They probably want to talk about the incident. And Cece's like very confident that she can, like, that, no, no, this will be great. I can fix it. We'll just paint Miss Fine as a disgruntled nut. We can do damage control. And Cece's like, I can fix anything. And Maxwell's like, there's an ad in Central or in Times Square with boopcock on it.
Right.
So he's not as confident in the ability to do damage control with this
Correct.
interview. Is there
Um,
anything you want to add?
yeah, I'll just add that Cece, you're right. She's totally confident she can fix anything, including this.
Hmm.
And her explanation is Sally isn't. She's not going to be the only one with a mic. Like as if she can like cut off Sally and then she's gonna paint the picture of Fran as a disgruntled nut. She's like,
Yeah.
she basically like, I'll have a mic, I'll direct it, it'll be fine.
Hmm.
That is not what happens.
Nope.
As we'll see on the next scene. Um,
Yes. Would you like to take us there?
I would love to. Um, so the next scene we're on Sally and you know, Sally introduces her guests and she turns to Maxwell and says, Max, isn't it ironic you're producing a play that's pro union, yet you're photographed dragging an employee across a picket line? And what I thought was so interesting in rewatching it is Cece is sitting next to Maxwell on the stage, and Cece's mouthing and sort of saying, I know, with a smile, like she's trying to like make light. I'm not even make light of, but like minimize the impact of it.
Hmm.
Um, so Maxwell explains that, he wants to go on record as saying that Norma employs nearly 300 union workers. And he's like, as he's finishing this, Cece, like, something changes and she's like, ooh, Nanny Fine is a disgruntled nut, and points at Fran in the audience because, of course, the rest of the family, including Fran and Niles, is in the audience. And
Hmm.
Sally's like, "Oh, look who we have here, Fran Fine the nanny." And she gets a round of applause, and she's invited on stage with you know the others. And at first, Fran's like, "No, I couldn't," but oh, okay, I guess I can. And so she gets up, and Sally asks Miss Boobcock to move. So
Hmm.
Fran gets to sit down next to Maxwell. She gets a mic on her lapel, and we see Cece trying to like lean in, like lean over, like next to Fran's chair, and Fran basically just like pushes her out of the way, like she's not here anymore.
There's a stagehand who takes Cece off too.
Yes, but
There's
like
no chair.
there's no chair. Cece's no longer welcome here. Um, and so Sally continues with her interview, asking Maxwell, did he know there was a strike? Of course he didn't. And he's like, well, what was I supposed to do? Everyone was already inside, the cast members, celebrities, the press. I called Beefsteak Charlie's, but they don't have a booth for 312. 312? That's a lot. Like, basically, that's a lot of important people, says Sally. And she asks Fran, well, what was he supposed to do? And like, Fran is totally distracted by her own
Oh
image.
yeah. Hmm.
Like, she's looking at herself, like a TV showing her own image, and she's like, not paying any attention to anything else. So anyway,
Hmm.
they finally get her attention back. And so Fran says, I understood why he crossed the picket line. Why can't he understand why I couldn't? And Maxwell brings up what she said to him in his office, the day before. I thought we were supposed to back each other up no matter what. And, you know, Sally basically is like, okay, folks, like, what are we talking about in one word? And Maxwell identifies support. Good. Fran, in one word. And Maxwell's like, in one word, good bloody luck.
Hmm.
And so Fran teases him, hey, mister, they had to turn the music on to get you off the stage at the Tony Awards. Like,
Hmm.
and Sally basically like cuts through their nonsense. And, you know, she basically turns it back to Maxwell and he says, look, it was a very important night for me. You're very important to me. Ergo, I wanted you there.
Hmm.
And Fran's like, ergo? Who's ergo? And so
Hmm.
one of the audience members gets Sally's attention. She's like, girlfriend, like, didn't you hear what the man just said? He said you're important to him. And Fran turns to him and she's like, is that what you said? And he's like, yes. And Fran's like, why can't they just communicate? Like, ladies, why can't they just communicate? If we were running the world, there'd be no more wars. And Maxwell, and she gets a very large round of applause from the women in the audience. And Maxwell is like, because there'd be so much bloody talk, there'd be no time for war. Isn't that right, gentlemen? And literally the only two gentlemen in the room are Niles and Brighton. And so they're like, woo, 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 woo. But
Hmm.
clearly they're outnumbered.
Yeah. They look around for a moment and then they do that because they're the only ones.
Correct.
Mhm.
Do you want to add anything?
Just at the very beginning, we first see like Fran Niles and the kids in the audience. And I think Niles says, "Where's Stedman?" And Gracie says, "That's Oprah. This is Sally." Or was it Maggie? One of them says, "That's Oprah. This is Sally." And
Right.
then whenever, Sally just immediately goes into that question about the picket line, you see the huge blown up picture of
Oh,
what
yes.
we saw before. And Fran's like, "Look at the size of that picture. Do you think I could get that framed?"
How much would it cost to have it
Yeah.
framed?
Yes.
Um,
Um,
would you like to take us to the
to the
kitchen?
kitchen. Yes. So it's the kitchen. Uh, Obviously, like the next morning, they're kind of debriefing in a sense. It's Fran and Maxwell, and Fran's saying, "Oh, Sally's really good. Like, she's able to get people to talk about things that you didn't know. They would talk about. Like, I didn't know where the tax shelter where you hid all your money. I didn't know how that came up."
Right.
But then, I believe, is it who mentions that the hotel was shamed into settling with the busboys? Is it Niles coming in,
I
or is
think
it Maxwell?
Maxwell still is the one.
Okay, Maxwell says that. Um, but at some point, Niles is there as well, and they're happy, that they settled, human dignity. But then Maxwell says it was for $8 an hour, and then Fran's like, "What? For bringing water?" After he have to ask them so many times, and then she tells Niles, "We should get organized. We're being, taken advantage of. Oh, do you want any more foie? No, I had enough beluga." Like, and obviously Maxwell's like, "Oh yeah, you have such a hard time," and he leaves. And Fran kind of complains to Niles, "Oh, he should walk a mile in my shoes." And he's like, "You can't even walk a mile in your shoes."
Exactly.
And then they start kind of humming, and I couldn't catch the tune. Did you
I
catch the tune?
couldn't either. I was going to ask you if you got it.
Okay, because it's like something obviously related to like the theme, I would think. But they're humming some type of song together as they're eating the fancy food.
Wonderful listeners, if you know what song they are humming, let us
Mm-hmm.
know. Thank you.
Mm-hmm. Yes. So, is there anything you want to add to that particular scene?
Just the what I thought was amusing because, as you point out, when Maxwell tells Fran that the hotel settled with the busboys for $8 an hour, her reaction is, "What? For bringing you for bringing water that you have to ask 16 times for, and then they take your plate before you're through." And Niles does that to Maxwell. He picks up Maxwell's plate and takes the cookie off it and starts eating it and says, "And you just know they're eating it in the back," which is
Yeah.
exactly what Niles is doing.
Yeah.
Although I guess there it's in the front because he's doing it right in front of Maxwell. Um,
Mm-hmm.
that's the only thing I wanted to add in that scene.
Okay. Do you want to take us to the end credit
Sure.
scene?
Um, so Fran is further explaining how classy Sally is, and she uses an example, the way she handled those bisexual Siamese twins. I'll tell you, Geraldo really sensationalized it, but Sally handled it with aplomb. And Max was like, "That's a plum, Miss Fine." "No," she says, "it really was a plum." And Max was like, "What does a plum have to do with bisexual Siamese twins?" And she's like, you had to see it.
Mm-hmm. It was pretty amazing.
It was pretty amazing. Thank you. I'm like, I know I'm missing part of it. Um, so yeah, basically has nothing to do with the rest of the episode other than
Mm-hmm.
the Sally reference.
Yeah. Yeah. So,
So, is there anything you want to talk about before we get into our shticks?
um, well, I'm trying to decide. Some of these, I think, fit into some of the shticks, so I'll just bring it up when we get there.
Okay.
What about
Uh,
you?
that
Any overarching?
that works for me.
Okay.
Shall we start with fashion?
Yes.
Would you
Yes.
like to start?
I'll let you start.
Okay. Um, I guess I'm going to start with what Fran actually wore to opening night.
Mhm.
She's wearing a floor length dress. It's another rainbow. It's another horizontal stripes, but these are much thicker. This is clearly something that she's better able to move in. She's wearing long black gloves and a yellow wrap. I think it looks great. I probably wouldn't wear it, but I think she looks fantastic.
Mhm. Yeah, it's more subdued than the original dress that we saw.
Yes. Did you like the original dress minus the her not being able to sit in it part?
Again, like personally, again, you and I differ in terms of colors because you
Fair.
usually like the bright stuff, and I'm not a huge fan. But she still looked good in it.
She
Like,
did.
but obviously, it was not a very practical dress.
No, no,
It
no, no,
made
no,
me
no,
want to
no.
sit down.
The reason I like bright colors is I grew up watching The Nanny. So
Makes sense.
exactly. Um, is are there any outfits you want to talk about?
So again, I don't think I really had a favorite, but I did want to note, like, so the dress that Maggie is wearing, I kind of like it looked kind of like an aquamarine to me. It made me think of like a Barbie dress. Um,
Fair.
right? Like that was kind of reminiscent. And of course, it was funny when Fran's like, "Oh, it makes you look cheap and tawdry. Put it back in my closet."
Yeah, I would not wear that.
No,
Too
nope.
short. Um,
Yeah, very revealing.
yeah, I mean, to me, it sort of reminded me of like a flapper's dress, although way shorter. But just
Hmm.
like the way it moved on its
Well,
own,
like the '60s, were they called baby doll or I don't know. Um, it's very short.
it was very, very short.
Hmm.
Very, very, very short. Um, I actually liked something Cece wore.
Really, which one?
So in the scene where Fran is planning how to like diffuse the situation with Maxwell,
Hmm.
Cece's wearing like I think it's a black skirt and then a bright red shiny top with poofy sleeves. They're not like obviously poofy, like they're not like sticking out, like standing up, but like when she moved, they were big. You could see the sleeves. I just kind of liked that outfit.
Hmm. Okay.
Um,
Right.
did you notice what Maggie actually wore to opening night?
I wasn't paying that close of attention, I guess. What did she wear?
It's sort of hard to see because she's only on camera very briefly, but it's nothing like what she was showing Fran.
Oh,
It's,
okay.
it's not bright colored. I think she's wearing, I think it's black, and I think it's, I'm trying to think. It looks like it's a long dress, so it's
Mhm.
not short. It's like the total opposite of what she was contemplating wearing.
Yeah.
So
Okay.
I just wanted to mention that because it's just so different.
Hmm.
So
Yeah. Any other fashion you wanted to discuss?
others will fall into other shticks, so I'll save it.
Okay. So with notable New Yorkers, this time I feel like we obviously still have references, but I don't feel like it was a ton.
I agree.
In the first scene, we get, God Save the Queen, which is obviously a reference to the British, Queen. Um,
I think it's
we,
actually the national anthem.
yeah,
Okay.
I mean, there's the national anthem, um, but people say that too, like in the UK. But lifesavers, I'm assuming we all know that's a candy.
Yes, that were,
Colorful around.
and they came in a paper tube, I guess, which showed the different colors and horizontal stripes, just like her dress.
Hmm. Now, did you look up Norma Ray?
I did. Um, so Norma, according to our friends at Wikipedia, it was a 1979 film about a woman named Norma Ray Webster who worked in a cotton mill. And she basically she gets promoted as a spot checker.
Mhm.
And so she's like responsible for quality control, and the other employees don't like her. And yeah. Do you
Mhm.
want to add to my half-hearted
Nope.
summary?
Nope.
Okay.
A real person, right?
Um,
Or no, it's just based off of a fictional.
I think I don't know.
Okay. I wasn't sure. That's why I was wanting to check. But apparently based off of some work. Like it's not just made up for this episode.
Correct. According to Wikipedia, the story is based on, and I'm quoting from Wikipedia, the story is based on Crystal Lee Sutton's life as a textile worker in Roanoke Rapids, North Carolina, where the battle for the workers' union took place against a J.P. Stevens textiles mill.
Okay.
End quote. So,
Hmm. Yeah. There's a reference to Barbie. Again, I feel like most of our listeners would be familiar. Um,
probably, yes.
yeah, Godiva chocolate.
Yes.
And did you notice that she takes a bite? Oh, nougat, and then she like kind of tries to reform it and put it back in the box,
Yes.
like
Yes.
cover up that she bit into it.
Yes. Although I don't know why she was so disappointed for nougat, but it's just me.
Yeah. Brighton sings along to the song "Yesterday" by the Beatles.
Mm-hmm.
Do you want to take over with some?
Sure. Let's see. Judy's is a former chain of clothing stores, which was founded by Marcia Israel in 1946. Eventually, the chain was purchased by someone else, by another entity, and then that entity was ultimately purchased by Charlotte Russe, which is a still existing clothing store. That's according to our friends at Wikipedia. Ted Kennedy, former
Hmm.
Democratic senator from Massachusetts, who seems to have had a bit of a drinking problem at times.
Hmm.
Um, Sally Jesse Raphael, her birth name is Sally Lowenthal. She's a former tabloid talk show host, according to our friends at Wikipedia. And just from watching this show, she is a real person.
Hmm.
Oprah, I think we talked about her previously. Stedman, Oprah's long-term partner, who is in his own right an author, educator, businessman, and public speaker. Geraldo, we've spoken about previously. Um, Ivanka Trump. Uh,
Hmm.
I'm then out.
Okay. Well, there's also the reference Danger Will Robinson.
Yes,
Is that is that Lost in Space
I do not know.
or is that a different
I'm
or is that
quickly
the
googling because I that is
thing?
Lost in Space episode one. Sorry, season one, episode 10,
Okay.
according to Google.
Yep. I've never personally watched the show, but I heard that phrase before. So,
According to Cape Gazette, they talk about, let's see, the catchphrase. It's from the show Space Family Robinson. They had a robot named Robbie who would warn the family of impending danger. The
hmm.
catchphrase "Danger, Will Robinson, danger" was uttered by the robot, and it has, and I quote, "long outlived the TV series, but seems to have found an eternal place in the mind of many baby boomers."
I am not a baby boomer, by the way.
I'm not either. But that's an interesting reference because it would seem to date Fran older than she is.
Hmm.
So
Yeah.
that's interesting.
Yeah. I think I'm out as well.
All right. So Yiddish Kop, I'm pretty certain anyone who's listened to any of our podcasts, they know what I'm about to say.
Hmm.
Shrimp is not kosher. Bacon is not kosher. Um, and it's kind of interesting here that in this episode, Fran actually acknowledges the fact that bacon and pork are not kosher, but she eats it. And her
Hmm.
comment that, all right, well, oh, all right, we all do. That's not true. A lot of Reform Jews do eat treif, not not kosher food or food that is by definition considered not fit for consumption.
Hmm.
Um, but there are some Jews in the Reform community that don't. There are some Reform Jews that keep kosher. And if you look at the more conservative movements of Judaism, they do not eat pork. So to say we all do is a misstatement or
Yeah,
an
I kind of
overstatement.
interpreted that as the Fines do,
Oh,
since her grandma um, eats it as well.
that's fair.
She's like, "Don't tell my grandma," and he's like, "She eats it too." Oh, right, we all do.
No, that's fair. I took it as a much broader meaning because this is something that is on my mind when I watch the show now, that it's sort of, to me, ridiculous how often she's eating trafe or how excited she is to eat trafe.
Mm-hmm.
Because like it's just not my experience, if you will.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
Um,
fair.
so yeah, that's what I wanted to mention.
Now, were the names that she was
I
trying to quiz the
Hanukkah and
cast?
Schlemma. I
Mm-hmm.
tried to find something, but I couldn't find anything.
Okay.
That's what I thought. I thought she must be referring to teachers at a yeshiva with names like that. They must be, yeshiva names.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but I couldn't find anything. Um, like there's a company called Hammaker Schlemmer, but I don't. That's not what she's referencing. So,
Okay.
90s nostalgia.
Yeah. So some of the phrasing, like the last scene where she's talking about bisexual Siamese twins, I think like today you would say just conjoined,
I think
not
that's right.
yeah,
Yeah,
'cause it seems a little dated and not PC.
correct. And so maybe I shouldn't have quoted that episode verbatim. That scene verbatim. Sorry, my wonderful listeners. I
No, I
hope
mean
I haven't offended anybody.
we're pointing out, you know. But and then the $8 an hour and they're like aghast by how much that is. It's like, obviously at this point there's still obviously issues about figuring out what minimum wage could be, but at this point we're far past $8 an hour. I'd like to note too, like inflation wise, minimum wage has not kept up
Right.
with that or anything. Um, it's interesting because for random reasons, I was trying to look at, how much has changed um,
Hmm.
since, the 90s and today and stuff. And I think, again, not exact things, but like $30,000 in like 1988 would be like $75,000 now,
Hmm.
thereabouts. And so it's just interesting the difference between then and now because even like I don't know if 725 obviously some states and places have upped minimum wage to like $15, but that's not universal
Right.
in in our country. Um but there's still people who have that reaction that Fran had where like, oh, that's too much for what they do. Um and so obviously, I personally think people should be able to live, like actually make a living on minimum wage. But we don't have to go too far down.
um, so as you were talking, I just kind of Googled what the value of $8 an hour would be
Mm-hmm.
in today's according to dollartimes.com, the value of $8 in 1994 would be equal to $15.30 in 2023.
Wow.
I mean, I don't know if that is accurate,
Yeah,
but
but no, kind of.
that's
Yeah,
what someone who does this type of calculation would say.
yeah. Isn't that interesting?
It really is. Um, yeah.
So, because I mean, I feel like especially the last year or two, we've really felt inflation, like prices going up with
Yeah.
things. So, but yet like that doesn't actually like salaries don't necessarily keep up with that.
Well, so kind of bleeding into future fun a little bit, I believe we later find out that Fran is making $6 an hour.
Oh, interesting. So that's why she was so upset.
Yeah.
Mm. That's
Um,
interesting too that she's hourly.
Yeah, so there's a different episode. I'm thinking of two different episodes, and one of them I think she says she makes $6 an hour. Another one she's like doing an amount per week.
Mm-hmm.
Um, uh, I think it's five. I think she says 500 a week, but that I'm fuzzier on because she's like asking for money plus dental,
Mm-hmm.
like dental coverage, and then she like talks herself down. Okay, whatever amount plus a water pick or something like that. Um,
That feels like today still.
we'll get there. That's season 4, season 5. So
Mm-hmm.
we have a while to get there. But at another point, someone makes a comment about how like invaluable her work is, and she's like, "Well, $6 an hour or something." Um,
Mm-hmm.
so that I think is what's actually driving her reaction. And
Yeah.
Niles probably makes something similar.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
So I hope that makes you feel a little bit better.
Yeah. Well, I mean, yeah, not over the general situation, but
No,
yeah.
but over her reaction,
Yeah, that makes sense. If she's like, "What?"
right?
Um,
She's just
that's why she
responsible for
immediately
their
said
kids.
that's why she tells Niles they need to get organized.
Right, we're being exploited, I think is what she says. We're being
Yeah.
exploited. We need to get organized.
Yeah. So I'll let you take a turn then with 90s nostalgia.
So the appearance of Sally's show and everyone's attire in the audience to me
Mhm.
looked very dated. Just the colors and the cuts, particularly the cut of Sally's suit, has that long jacket. To me, that looked very 90s.
Mhm.
Your
We
turn.
also saw an old limo.
We did. We did. Um, would you like to take another one that is not our weekly freebie?
Mhm. Well, it was interesting with um like I'd be curious how like if they had more cell phones and stuff like that back then, like the whole situation with the model, like if it'd probably turn out the same way. Like Fran would still insist to meet like the brother who's driving, and that likely would turn out the same. But so never mind that.
Well, I thought you were going to say how the picket line incident would work, would be dealt with today. It would have broken. It would have been news before the printing of
Oh
the
yeah,
paper the
it
next
would be all
morning.
over social media
Bingo.
for sure. Yeah. I mean, people, and it would be like multiple photos, like, because everybody there would like pull out their cell phone as soon as they realized that there was a commotion, and they would take video and
Exactly.
that. And yeah, there would be like a larger discussion, I'm sure, with
Exactly.
everybody having different opinions.
Um, I exactly. Um, this is probably more of like a personal comment than like truly 90s nostalgia, but Gracie's Barbie underwear,
Hmm.
like I don't know about you. I'm pretty sure I had like patterned and like Barbie underwear at some point when I was a kid. I
Hmm.
no longer have Barbie underwear as an adult. So to
Yeah.
me that feels very 90s.
Yeah. But yeah, but Peter did look like he came from the Gap from the 90s.
He did.
Like he looked straight out from the Gap in the 90s.
Agreed.
But yeah, in terms of uh the whole situation with Cece's last name, the boobcock. um Today she probably would have just sent the email herself, maybe. It wouldn't have gone through Niles to send to a messenger.
Right.
I don't know. Like that would probably bypass Niles' interference.
That's a good point.
But
And actually on that note, uh on Sally's show, or the photographer probably would not have referred to Cece as Miss Boobcock because
mhm.
there would have been a fact checker who would have seen Cece's like profile, like one of her online profiles, and been like, "Oh, her name is Babcock, not Boobcock."
Mhm. Yeah.
So, I'll just throw in one other: the print newspaper. I know some
Mhm.
people still get print newspapers, but it seems like more people consume their news digitally
Yeah.
today.
And so definitely just cutting out that specific article would not have prevented Maxwell from seeing the actual picture and article because it would have like
Correct.
popped up on his phone. So
Someone would have emailed it to him or texted it to him or
yeah,
put it on any one of his social media profiles.
tagged him. Yeah.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah.
Um, then I'm out
Yeah.
on okay.
Let's
Um,
move to some future fun.
all right. I have a handful. So I'll start with the least meaningful. Your comment about Fran and the Godiva chocolate. One of the Valentine's Day episodes in a later season. I think it's in a later season, but anyway, Fran has a box of Godivas and offers them to Maxwell and points to each one and identifies what it is, and she basically says, just don't flip it over, because she had basically like drilled into each to see what it was. Um, so this is also, we saw the picture that Fran wanted to have framed from the newspaper. This is not the only time that Fran's picture is going to be in the paper. In a later episode called The Hockey Show, there's a picture of her at a New York Rangers game, and I won't get into why, but she comments on how great a picture it is of her, that like, if I ever get married, this is the guy who needs to take photos. You commented on Niles helping Cece up in the episode in season 3 called Pen Pal. There's a scene where the two of them are sitting on the couch drinking together on a Saturday night, and Cece says, "I don't make it a habit of drinking with the help." And Niles says, "I've never been any help to you." And she says, "Exactly." I won't say where that goes, but for diehard fans of the show, you know what happens next and why Fran and Maxwell are shocked when they walk in. So that's all I'll say on that. Also, with the scene where Maxwell's hidden by the fridge door, they have that same bit in the show, in the episode The Hockey Show, where Maxwell was supposed to go and get the hockey player Fran had been dating to apologize for something, and instead he went out with the boys and comes home a little inebriated and starts telling Niles about what happened, and, "Oh, don't tell Miss Fine." Guess what? Miss Fine was behind the fridge door and heard the whole thing.
Mm-hmm.
And then the last thing I will say is, this is not the only daytime talk show that Fran gets to appear on. In season 5, on the episode The Rosie Show, she becomes a regular for a brief period of time on the Rosie O'Donnell Show. So, yeah, lots of fun things to look forward to in the future.
Mm-hmm.
I think it's time to rate the episode.
Yep. And it's
Uh,
your turn.
I knew it. I knew it was my turn. I generally like this episode. It's not one that sticks in my mind as like, I gotta watch it over and over again, but I did really enjoy rewatching it. I like the juxtaposition of the pro-union show versus Fran being dragged across the picket line. I really love the discussion on Sally's show where Maxwell basically just caves and says, "This was a very important night for me, and you're very important to me. Ergo, I wanted you there."
Mm-hmm.
So I like that. I enjoyed the physical humor with Cece. I think I'm going to give it a 4. But that feels right to me. How about you?
I'm joining you with a 4.
Excellent.
Yes.
Do you want to add
So,
any rationale?
no, like I said, there's a little bit of problematic stuff that we've kind of covered. But generally, again, I liked that kind of conversation, like you said, where he acknowledges that she's important to him. So yeah,
All right.
uh, yeah, I think that's it.
All right. Well, that's all we have for you today. We hope you had a fine time with us as we revisited The Nanny. Join us next week when we'll be discussing episode 36, I've Got a Secret.
If you'd like to reach us on social media, you can find us on Twitter at Nanny Revisited. You can also send us an email at afinetimenannyrevisited@gmail.com. Have a great week.